Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Moviesnips. There is something inherently fascinating and scary about imagining a world in which the Axis powers defeated the Allies following World War II. While the concept definitely makes for an interesting science fiction franchise, there are some significant issues that cast doubt on whether the world depicted in The Man in the High Castle would be conceivable or not. Before I get further into this, please remember to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. The world depicted in The Man in the High Castle is one in which the Axis powers have obtained total victory over the Allies. The Greater Nazi Reich and the Empire of Japan have divided up the world amongst themselves, with a few neutral regions to serve as buffer zones between their respective territories. The first problem with this reality is that it is unlikely that Germany could have ever defeated and occupied the United States following World War II. The US alone, even an economically weaker US following the Great Depression, was more than capable of defeating both the Germans and the Japanese combined. The US had significantly more resources than all Axis powers combined, as well as a larger population. The US could produce more equipment than the Axis powers by far, and the capability of the US military would eventually have dwarfed that of the Axis powers. North America was also geographically isolated as a continent, which would have made a successful invasion and sustained occupation by either power very difficult, especially given the technology of the era. The second issue with this world is contending with the fact that Germany suffered an immense blow to their war machine and logistical supply lines after making the ill-fated decision of invading the former Soviet Union on the Eastern Front. Much of Nazi Germany's military resources were sucked dry because of this egregious mistake. The brutal Russian winter was also a decisive factor in halting the German advance dead in its tracks. People seem to forget that the Soviet Union was an emerging superpower at the time, and despite being less organized and less technologically advanced than Hitler's Wehrmacht, it had almost twice the military manpower of Germany at the time. The Western powers were not responsible for Russia rebuilding its military, it did that on its own. Adding to this, the sheer geographical size of the former Soviet Union made a sustained Nazi occupation unlikely, especially given that much of Germany's armed forces were tied up with occupying and subduing much of Western Europe. A more likely scenario for the Germans to have emerged victorious would have been if the Nazis never attacked the Soviet Union and instead solely concentrated on occupying and controlling Western Europe, which would have led to a more limited Eurocentric Nazi empire, assuming that the United States never entered the war and remained isolationist. Furthermore, one of the premises for the Axis victory in The Man in the High Castle is that FDR was assassinated and that the American Lend-Lease program was never effectuated. The Lend-Lease program was an American policy of giving aid in various forms to the Allies prior to and following the American entry into World War II. The Lend-Lease program started in 1938, but was greatly expanded in March 1941 through the final years of the war. In total, under the Lend-Lease program, Britain received $31 billion of aid and the Soviet Union received $11 billion. This aid came in the form of aircraft, weapons, ammunition, and medical supplies. One issue with this premise is that the Lend-Lease program could still have been effectuated without FDR. While FDR was a big proponent of the Lend-Lease program, there was still a lot of support for it within the US government. Not having FDR in power wouldn't necessarily have negated the effectuation of the program. Secondly, Britain would have been left to fend for itself against the attempted Nazi invasion of October 1940 had the Lend-Lease program never happened. While the donation of a large amount of US military aid and supplies helped bolster the British defensive, it didn't make or break the UK. Germany flat out didn't possess a large enough surface fleet to secure the English Channel, pull off a massive naval invasion of the British Isles, and then resupply their forces in England, so this argument doesn't hold up very well. Perhaps the strongest premise that the world and The Man in the High Castle relies on is that the Nazis developed the atomic bomb before the United States did, and used it as an intimidation tool to deter any would-be resistance movements from organizing on a large scale and revolting against their Nazi overlords. In actuality, this couldn't be further from the truth. Hitler never had high hopes for developing a nuclear weapons program. The Germans did have a nuclear weapons program towards the end of World War II, but it was years from completion and not of urgent interest to Hitler or any of the other Nazi leaders. Hitler was not very keen on developing a nuclear weapons program because he wanted Lebensraum, which is living space for the Aryan peoples. He knew of the horrific effects that a nuclear weapon could produce when detonated over a populated area and wasn't keen on damaging fertile land that could be developed rather than poisoned. Furthermore, Hitler's persecution of the Jews caused many Jewish scientists, Albert Einstein included, to flee to the United States. Some of these scientists would go on to collaborate with the US military in an effort to develop the atomic bomb. The fifth premise that the world depicted in The Man in the High Castle rests upon is that the greater Nazi Reich and the Empire of Japan have enough manpower and resources to effectuate a long-term occupation of the regions shown in this map, which are shaded in red for the Nazis and orange for the Japanese. The two empires would have to find a way to continually subdue and occupy an incredibly vast amount of geographical area, and given the authoritarian and oppressive ruling styles of both regimes, it would seem unlikely that they would be able to hold on to that much territory for an extended period of time, without active resistance movements breaking out in all corners of their respective controlled territories. I'd like to thank you for watching my video today. If you think I missed anything or would like to add anything to this discussion, please comment down below. Please also remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and please check out my channel for more Man in the High Castle videos.